Joe Miller wiped his grease-stained hands on an old rag and looked at the clock on the wall of his garage. It was almost 7 in the evening. The summer sun still hung in the sky, casting long shadows across the concrete floor of Miller's Motors. Joe had owned this garage in the small town of Red Brook for 15 years. People knew him as honest, skilled, and fair with his prices. "That should do it for today," Joe said to himself as he closed the hood of Mrs. Wilson's sedan. He had fixed the strange noise that had been bothering her for weeks. It was a simple, loose belt, nothing that would break her budget. As Joe began to put away his tools, he heard the sound of people gathering at the park across the street. It was the annual summer barbecue that brought the whole town together. The smell of grilled burgers and the sound of children laughing drifted into his workspace. Joe wasn't planning to go. He had work to finish, and social events weren't really his thing. But when he walked outside to take out the trash, his neighbor, Frank, waved him over. "Come on, Joe, you work too hard. The burgers are great this year," Frank called out. Joe shrugged and decided a quick visit wouldn't hurt. He locked up his garage and crossed the street to the park. People greeted him with friendly smiles and pats on the back. Joe had fixed most of their cars at some point. He grabbed a paper plate and a burger and found a quiet spot under an oak tree. That's when he first saw her. A small girl with blonde pigtails sat in a wheelchair at the edge of the playground, watching other children chase each other and climb on the jungle gym. Her face showed a mix of sadness and longing that made Joe's heart ache. "Who's that?" Joe asked Frank when he walked by with a soda. "That's Lily Peterson. Poor kid was in a bad car crash 2 years ago, lost the use of her legs. The Petersons moved here about 6 months ago for Alan's new job at the bank." Joe watched as Lily's mother, a kind-looking woman with the same blonde hair, leaned down to talk to her daughter. The girl forced a smile but kept looking at the other children playing. Joe finished his burger in silence, his mind turning like gears in an engine. When he went home that night, he couldn't get the image of the girl out of his head. The next morning, Joe opened his garage earlier than usual. After finishing his regular work, he stayed late, and he did the same the next day and the day after that. In a back corner of his garage, a special project was taking shape. Joe called his old friend Sam, who owned a scrapyard 2 towns over. "I need some parts for a special build," Joe explained. "Nothing fancy, but it has to be good quality." Sam was curious but didn't ask too many questions. 3 days later, he delivered a small electric motor, a car battery, and various metal parts. For the next 3 weeks, Joe worked on his secret project every chance he got. He used parts from old kiddie cars, modified a go-kart frame, and carefully designed special controls that wouldn't require foot pedals. Every detail was carefully thought out with safety in mind. One day, Kate Peterson brought her minivan to Joe's garage for an oil change. While Joe worked, Kate mentioned how hard things had been for Lily since the accident. "She used to be so active," Kate said, her eyes sad. "Now she just watches from the sidelines. We're trying to find activities that work for her, but it's not easy." Joe nodded and changed the subject, not ready to reveal his project yet. But that evening, he worked even later than usual, determined to finish what he had started. Finally, after nearly a month of late nights and early mornings, the project was complete. Joe had built a mini car specially designed for a child who couldn't use her legs. It was bright red with a comfortable seat, safety belts, and hand controls that could operate the vehicle completely without foot pedals. It had a solid frame for stability, a limited speed for safety, and even a small horn. Joe loaded the mini car into the back of his pickup truck and drove to the Peterson house on Cedar Street. His hands felt sweaty on the steering wheel. What if she didn't like it? What if her parents were upset by his surprise? The Petersons lived in a small, well-kept house with a ramp leading to the front door. Joe parked in the driveway and took a deep breath before knocking. Alan Peterson answered, looking surprised to see the mechanic at his door. "Joe, is everything okay with our van?" "Everything's fine with the van, Mr. Peterson. I actually brought something for Lily, if that's okay." Confused but curious, Alan called his wife and daughter. Kate came to the door with Lily in her wheelchair. Close behind. "I made something," Joe said simply, suddenly feeling shy about his creation. "Would you like to see it?" The family followed him to his truck. Joe lowered the tailgate and carefully brought out the minicar, setting it on the driveway. It gleamed in the afternoon sun, freshly painted and polished. "What is that?" Lily asked, her eyes growing wide. "It's a car," Joe explained, kneeling down to her level. "For you. It has special controls so you can drive it with just your hands. Would you like to try it?" Lily looked at her parents, her face full of disbelief and hope. Kate had her hand over her mouth and Alan just stared at the minicar in shock. "Can I really?" Lily whispered. With her parents' stunned nod, Joe carefully helped Lily from her wheelchair into the minicar seat. He showed her how the hand controls worked, how to go forward, backward, and turn, how to honk the horn and how to stop safely. Lily caught on quickly. Soon she was driving slowly around the driveway, her face lit up with the biggest smile Joe had ever seen. She honked the horn and the sound of her laughter filled the air. Kate was crying now, watching her daughter experience a freedom she hadn't had in years. Alan put a hand on Joe's shoulder, too overwhelmed to speak. "It's completely safe," Joe assured them. "I tested everything myself. The speed is limited and it has an automatic cutoff switch if needed." "How much do we owe you?" Alan finally managed to ask. Joe shook his head. "Nothing. It was just sitting there as spare parts anyway." It wasn't true, but Joe didn't care about the money or the time he had spent. As Joe drove home that evening, the image of Lily's smile stayed with him. For the first time in years, his garage felt like more than just a place of business. It felt like a place where something magical had happened. He didn't know it yet, but that mini-car would change more than just Lily's life. In 3 days, AI, black limousine would pull up outside his garage, bringing an opportunity Joe Miller could never have imagined. 3 days passed since Joe gave Lily her mini-car. Word spread quickly through Redbrook about what the mechanic had done. People stopped by his garage more often, some bringing cookies or pies as a way to show how much they admired his kindness. Joe felt embarrassed by all the attention. He hadn't built the car to get praise. He just wanted to help a child feel normal again. It was Wednesday evening, and Joe was getting ready to close his garage for the day. The sun was setting, painting, the sky orange and pink. He had just finished changing the oil in Dr. Brown's old truck and was wiping his tools clean. The radio played soft country music in the background. Joe heard a car pull up outside, its engine different from the usual vehicles that came to his shop. The sound was smoother, quieter, like an expensive machine. He figured it was probably someone passing through town who needed directions. When he walked to the garage door, Joe stopped in surprise. A long black limousine was parked right in front of Miller's Motors. The car was so shiny that it reflected the sunset like a mirror. Joe had never seen a vehicle like this in Redbrook before. The back door of the limousine opened, and a tall man in a dark blue suit stepped out. He looked about 50 years old with salt and pepper hair and glasses. His shoes were so polished that Joe could almost see his own face in them. "Are you Joseph Miller?" the man asked, walking toward Joe with his hand extended. "Just Joe," he answered, wiping his hand on a rag before shaking the stranger's hand. "Can I help you with something? Car trouble?" The man smiled. "No car trouble. My name is Gregory Blackwell. I'm the CEO of Horizon Technologies." Joe had heard of Horizon Technologies. They made everything from smartphones to medical equipment. Their headquarters was in a big city about 3 hours away. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Blackwell," Joe said, still confused about why such an important person would visit his small garage. "What brings you to Redbrook?" Gregory looked around the garage with interest. "May I come in for a moment? I have something important to discuss with you." Joe nodded and led the man inside. He quickly cleared some papers off a chair so Gregory could sit down. Joe leaned against his workbench, curious about what this visit could mean. "I'll get right to the point," Gregory said. "My niece was at the park 3 days ago when a little girl drove up in what looked like a miniature car. My niece took a video and sent it to me." He pulled out his phone and showed Joe a video of Lily driving her mini-car around the playground, laughing as other children ran alongside her. "The little girl's mother told my niece that the local mechanic had built it specially for her daughter, who couldn't walk. She said you refused to take any payment for it. Joe shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't a big deal. I had some spare time and parts. Gregory put his phone away and leaned forward. Mr. Miller, what you created is actually a very big deal. I had my engineers look at the video. The way you designed those hand controls and safety features is quite remarkable, especially considering the resources you had available. Joe wasn't sure how to respond. He had just done what seemed right at the time. Horizon Technologies has a division focused on mobility solutions for people with disabilities, Gregory continued. We've been working on projects for children with mobility issues, but frankly, some of your intuitive designs are better than what our team has come up with after months of research. Joe felt his face grow warm. I'm just a small-town mechanic, Mr. Blackwell. A small-town mechanic with exceptional talent, Gregory corrected him. I didn't come here just to compliment you, though. I have a proposal. He reached into his suit, jacket, and pulled out a business card and a small folder. Horizon Technologies would like to hire you as a consultant for our Mobility Solutions Department. We want you to help design accessible vehicles for children with disabilities. Joe took the card and folder, opening it to find papers describing the job offer. His eyes widened when he saw the salary figure. It was more money than he made in 3 years at his garage. This is very generous, Joe said, his voice slightly shaky. But I have my garage here. People depend on me. Gregory nodded understandingly. We don't expect you to decide right away. The position would require you to relocate to our research facility in Burlington. It's a big change, I know. Joe looked around his garage. The tools hanging on the wall had been with him for years. The smell of motor oil and grease was as familiar as his own home. The thought of leaving it all behind was scary. Why me? Joe finally asked. You must have professional engineers and designers. We do, Gregory agreed. But they don't have what you have. You built that car not because someone paid you to, but because you saw a need and filled it. That kind of empathy, combined with practical skill, is rare. Plus, you solved design problems that our team has been struggling with, and you did it with limited resources in a small garage. Joe ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. Can I think about it? Of course, Gregory said, standing up. Take a week. All my contact information is in that folder. We can discuss any questions or concerns you might have. As they walked back outside, Gregory stopped by the limousine. One more thing, Mr. Miller. That little girl's smile. In the video? That's something my company wants to bring to thousands of children like her. With your help, we think we can do that. The driver opened the door, and Gregory handed Joe another small card. This has my personal cell number. Call me anytime if you have questions. Joe watched the limousine drive away, the folder still in his hand. The quiet of the evening settled around him as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. His simple act of kindness had somehow caught the attention of one of the biggest technology companies in the country. As he locked up his garage for the night, Joe thought about Lily's face when she first drove her mini car. Then he thought about all the other children who might benefit from something similar. The decision ahead of him was going to be one of the hardest he'd ever made. What Joe didn't know was that this was just the beginning. The limousine's visit would lead to changes, bigger than he could possibly imagine. Joe barely slept that night. He kept thinking about Gregory Blackwell's offer. The folder sat on his kitchen table, and Joe looked at it over breakfast. The salary was more money than he had ever imagined making. But money wasn't everything. For 5 days, Joe went about his work at the garage as usual. He changed tires, fixed engines, and helped people with their car problems. But his mind was far away, weighing the pros and cons of leaving Red Brook. On Friday afternoon, Sheriff Dan came by to get his patrol car's brakes checked. Heard you got a big offer from some fancy company, the sheriff said as Joe worked under the car. News traveled fast in small towns. Joe slid out from under the car and wiped his forehead. Word gets around quick. So, you gonna take it? Sheriff Dan asked. Joe shrugged. I don't know. It's a good opportunity, but this garage has been my life for 15 years. People here count on me. The sheriff nodded. That's true, but you know what? Before you came to town, old Pete Harris fixed our cars, and before him there was someone else. Town always finds a way. Joe hadn't thought about it that way before. But what about Mrs. Ellis? She can barely afford repairs as it is. I give her the friend discount. Community looks after its own, Sheriff Dan said. If you decide to go, we'll figure something out for folks like Mrs. Ellis. Throughout the day, more people came by. Some needed car repairs, but others just wanted to talk about the job offer. To Joe's surprise, almost everyone encouraged him to take it. You've got a gift, Joe, said Bill from the hardware store. Seems a shame to keep it just in Red Brook when you could help kids all over. By Sunday, Joe was still torn. He decided to take a walk to clear his head. Without really planning it, he found himself heading toward the town park. When he got there, he heard the sound of children laughing. In the middle of a group of kids was Lily in her mini car. She drove in circles, while other children ran around her. They were playing some kind of game where Lily was it and had to catch the others by tagging them with her car. Joe sat on a bench and watched. Lily's face was bright with joy as she controlled her car with confidence. She wasn't sitting on the sidelines anymore. She was part of the action. She hasn't stopped driving it since you gave it to her, said a voice beside him. Kate Peterson had walked up to the bench. May I sit down? Joe nodded, and Kate sat beside him. For a while they just watched Lily play. We heard about the job offer, Kate finally said. Joe sighed. Does everyone in town know my business? Kate smiled. Pretty much. Small towns, you know how it is. I don't know what to do, Joe admitted. If I leave, what happens to people here who need their cars fixed at a fair price? Joe, Kate said gently, before you gave Lily that car, she was so sad all the time. She felt left out, different. Now look at her. They both watched as Lily smoothly drove her car around a tree, chasing after a boy who was laughing as he ran. You did that for her? Kate continued. Imagine how many other children like Lily could have that same joy if you helped design cars for them too. Joe thought about that. One car had changed Lily's life. What if he could be part of creating thousands of such vehicles? But my garage, he started. Will someone else step up if you leave? Kate asked. Joe thought about Sam, who owned the scrapyard. Sam had been a mechanic before opening his yard. He had mentioned wanting to move back to Red Brook someday. Maybe, Joe said slowly. The next morning, Joe called Sam. Remember how you said you missed working as a mechanic? How would you feel about taking over my garage? Sam was surprised but interested. They talked for an hour about the details. By the end of the call, Joe felt a weight lift from his shoulders. If he decided to leave, his customers would still be in good hands. That afternoon, Joe called Gregory Blackwell's personal number. Mr. Miller, Gregory answered on the second ring. I've been hoping to hear from you. I have some questions about the job, Joe said. He asked about the work hours, the team he would be joining, and how much freedom he would have in designing. Gregory answered each question patiently, explaining that Joe would be a key part of the design team, but would have the freedom to try his own ideas. One more question, Joe said. If I develop something that helps kids like Lily, would the company make it affordable? Not just for rich families, but for everyone who needs it? There was a pause on the line. That's not usually the first question people ask, Gregory said. Most want to know about benefits or vacation time, but to answer you, yes. Part of our mission with the mobility division is to make solutions accessible to all income levels. We have programs for families who can't afford the full price. Joe took a deep breath. Then I'd like to accept the position. Excellent. Gregory sounded genuinely pleased. My assistant will email you all the details. We'd like you to start in 2 weeks if possible. 2 weeks. Joe looked around his garage. It seemed both like very little time and too much time to say goodbye to the place that had been his life for so long. The next day, Joe put up a sign in the garage window. Miller's Motors will be under new management starting June 1st. Thank you. You for 15 great years. People came by all day to congratulate him and express their sadness at his leaving. Mrs. Ellis brought cookies. Sheriff Dan gave him a firm handshake. Bill from the hardware store promised to send Joe Christmas cards. That evening, as Joe was about to close up, he heard the now familiar sound of Lily's mini car outside. She drove up with her parents walking behind her. "We heard you're leaving," Lily said, looking up at Joe from her car. "Mom says you're going to make cars like mine for other kids who can't walk." Joe knelt down to her level. "That's right. Is that okay with you?" Lily nodded seriously. "It's good. Every kid should have a car like mine." Then she reached into a small bag hanging from the side of her car and pulled out a drawing. It showed a stick figure with a wrench next to a red car. "I made this for you to take with you." Joe carefully took the drawing, his throat suddenly tight with emotion. "Thank you, Lily. I'll hang it up at my new workplace." As the Petersons left, Joe looked at the child's drawing. In that moment, he knew he had made the right decision. His life was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine, but it would be worth it. Joe's first day at Horizon Technologies was nothing like working in his garage. The building was huge and modern, with glass walls and bright lights. People in suits and lab coats walked quickly through wide hallways. Joe felt out of place in his clean button-up shirt and new pants. He missed the smell of motor oil and the feel of tools in his hands. A young woman named Nancy met Joe at the front desk. She had a friendly smile and showed him around the building. Joe tried to remember all the turns and doorways, but he knew he would get lost without help for the first few days. "And this is where you'll be working," Nancy said, opening a door to a large room filled with tables, computers, and half-built prototypes of various vehicles. "This is our Mobility Solutions Lab." 5 people looked up from their work when Joe entered. A tall woman with short gray hair stepped forward. "Welcome, Joe. I'm Dr. Linda Reed, head of the mobility team. We're excited to have you join us." She introduced the others, 2 engineers, a safety expert, and a designer. They all seemed nice, but Joe could tell they were curious about why a small-town mechanic was joining their team. "Gregory has told us about your amazing work," Linda continued. "We'd love to see your designs and hear your ideas." Joe took out his notebook where he had sketched his plans for Lily's car. The drawings were simple compared to the complex blueprints on the walls of the lab, but the team gathered around with interest. For the next hour, Joe explained how he had built the mini car for Lily. He showed them how he designed the hand controls, to be simple enough for a child to use. The team asked many questions and took notes. "What made you think of this specific control layout?" asked Ben, one of the engineers. Joe thought about it. "Well, I watched how Lily moved in her wheelchair. I noticed she had good control with her right hand but sometimes struggled with her left. So I put the main controls on the right side," Linda nodded. "You designed for the specific user, not for a generic case. That's exactly the approach we need more of here." By lunchtime, Joe started to feel more comfortable. The team took him to the company cafeteria, which had more food options than all the restaurants in Red Brook combined. After lunch, Gregory Blackwell himself came to the lab. "How's our new team member settling in?" he asked. "Very well," Linda said. "Joe has already given us some ideas we hadn't considered." Gregory smiled. "I knew he would. Joe, there's something I'd like to show you." Joe followed Gregory to an elevator that went down to a lower level of the building. They walked through a hallway to a door marked Special Projects Division. "What I'm about to show you is confidential," Gregory said as he used his badge to open the door. "Only a few people at Horizon know about this work." The room they entered was unlike anything Joe had seen before. Strange machines hummed along the walls. In the center was a device that looked like a cross between a car engine and a computer. "What is all this?" Joe asked, staring at the unfamiliar technology. Gregory's face became serious. "The truth is, Horizon Technologies isn't just working on mobility solutions for children on Earth." "On Earth?" Joe repeated, confused. Gregory nodded. 6 years ago, our satellites detected a signal from deep space. It wasn't random noise. It was a message, and we managed to decode it. Joe's mouth fell open in shock. "You're saying..." "Yes. We're not alone in the universe." The message came from what we now call the Galactic Coalition, an alliance of civilizations from different star systems. They've been watching Earth for centuries. They wait until a planet develops certain technologies before making contact. Joe couldn't believe what he was hearing. Why are you telling me this? Because your work with Lily caught their attention too, Gregory explained. The coalition values innovation driven by compassion. They believe it's the mark of a civilization ready to join their community. Your mini-car design was flagged in their monitoring systems. Joe laughed nervously. You're joking, right? Gregory didn't smile. He walked to a computer and pulled up a video. The screen showed a strange room where 3 beings stood. They weren't human. They had similar shapes to people, but with subtle differences. Skin colors in shades of blue and green. Eyes slightly larger, heads shaped differently. This is a live feed from our communication room with coalition representatives, Gregory said calmly, as if showing a normal business meeting. Joe stepped back, his legs suddenly weak. This can't be real. It's very real, Gregory assured him. And your design principles for adaptive technology have significant value to them. Many coalition species have different physical abilities and needs. Your intuitive approach to creating controls for someone with different mobility capabilities is exactly what they're interested in. Joe stared at the screen, trying to process what he was seeing and hearing. So, you didn't just hire me to design cars for kids? That is definitely part of your job, Gregory said quickly. But we hoped you would also contribute to our coalition exchange program. Your designs could help species across the galaxy, and in return, we gain access to their knowledge. Joe ran a hand through his hair. This morning I was worried about finding the cafeteria, and now you're telling me my designs could be used by aliens? Gregory placed a hand on Joe's shoulder. It's a lot to take in, I know. You don't have to decide anything today. Just keep doing what you do best, solving problems with creativity and heart. The rest will follow naturally. As they left the secret room, Joe's mind raced with questions. Everything he thought he knew about the world had just changed. He had moved from a small garage in Redbrook to a company that talked to beings from other stars. Back in the mobility lab, Joe tried to focus on his work, but he kept thinking about what Gregory had shown him. The other team members noticed his distraction. First day overwhelming? Linda asked kindly. Joe nodded, unable to share the real reason for his distraction. It's very different from my garage. You'll get used to it, she assured him. Why don't we start with something practical? We have a prototype mobility chair that needs better controls. Maybe you can take a look? Grateful for something normal to focus on, Joe spent the rest of the afternoon working on the chair. Despite everything he had learned, when his hands were busy solving a mechanical problem, he felt at home. That evening in his new apartment, Joe called Sam to check on the garage. Then he looked at Lily's drawing, which he had pinned to his wall. The simple image of a man with a wrench next to a car seemed so innocent now. What have I gotten myself into, Lily? Joe whispered to the drawing. His life had changed more dramatically than he could have ever imagined, and it was only his first day. 10 years passed since Joe first joined Horizon Technologies. His life had changed in ways he never could have imagined that day when he built a mini-car for a little girl who couldn't walk. Joe stepped out of the shuttle and looked at the town square of Redbrook. It was his first visit back in nearly 2 years. The town looked mostly the same, but there was a new statue in the center of the square covered with a large cloth. A crowd of people had gathered around it. Many faces in the crowd were familiar to Joe. Sam was there, now with gray in his beard, still running the garage that once belonged to Joe. Sheriff Dan stood nearby, his uniform a bit tighter around the middle than before. And there was Bill from the hardware store leaning on a cane but smiling widely when he spotted Joe. "There he is," someone called out, and the crowd turned toward him. People clapped and cheered as Joe walked forward, feeling embarrassed by all the attention. Mayor Wilson stepped up to a small platform. "Today we honor one of Redbrook's own. Joe Miller started as our town mechanic, fixing our cars and charging fair prices. But one day, he did something special. He built a car for a little girl who couldn't walk. That act of kindness changed not just her life, but eventually, all of our lives." Joe looked through the crowd and spotted Kate and Alan Peterson. Between them stood a young woman with blonde hair, now 18 years old. Lily smiled at Joe and gave him a small wave. The mayor continued. Most of you know what happened after Joe left to work for Horizon Technologies. His designs for accessible vehicles became the foundation for mobility solutions used around the world. But what many of you didn't know until recently was the bigger impact of Joe's work. The mayor nodded to Joe, inviting him to speak. Joe had never been good at public speaking, but he stepped onto the platform anyway. When I left Redbrook, Joe began, I thought I was just going to design cars for kids like Lily. I never expected what came next. He paused, remembering how shocked he had been that first day when Gregory showed him the communication room. It turns out the way I designed that mini car caught the attention of some visitors from very far away, the crowd murmured. Even after the public announcement 2 years ago about the Galactic Coalition, many people still found it hard to believe that Earth was now part of an alliance with beings from other worlds. The Coalition valued how I designed things with the user in mind, Joe continued. They said it showed something special about humans, that we care about helping each other, that we see differences not as problems, but as challenges to solve. With creativity, Joe pointed to the cloth-covered statue. I'm told this monument is supposed to honor me, but really it should honor all of us. It was this community that taught me to care for others. It was Lily who inspired me. It was Sam who took over the garage so I could leave. The mayor stepped forward and pulled a rope. The cloth fell away, revealing not a statue of Joe, as he had feared, but a bronze sculpture of a mini car. A plaque at the base read, Miller, Plaza, where a small act of kindness connected us to the stars. The crowd applauded. Joe stepped down from the platform, feeling a mixture of pride and humbleness. After the ceremony, Lily approached Joe. She no longer used the mini car. Instead, she moved in a sleek mobility chair that responded to the slightest touch of her hand on its control panel. The chair was one of Joe's designs, now manufactured by Horizon and available to people around the world. It's good to see you, Joe, Lily said with a smile. I hear you're doing amazing things. Joe shrugged. I just keep solving problems like I did in the garage. Mom told me you're going off-world next month, Lily said, her eyes bright with excitement. To the Coalition hub station. Joe nodded. They want me to work directly with their engineers on a new project. Take me with you, Lily said suddenly. I'm serious. I've been studying xenobiology in college. I want to work with the Coalition medical teams. My advisor says I have a unique perspective that would be valuable. Joe looked at her in surprise. You want to go to space? Lily grinned. You gave me my first taste of freedom with that car. Now I want more. I want to see what's out there. Joe thought about the shy little girl who had once watched other children play from the sidelines. Now she wanted to travel to the stars. I'll talk to Gregory about it, Joe promised. Later that evening, Joe visited his old garage. Sam had kept it much the same, though there were now pictures on the wall of various vehicles he had fixed. Among them was a faded photo of Joe standing next to Lily in her original mini car. You did good, Joe, Sam said, handing him a cup of coffee. The whole town's proud of you. Joe looked around the familiar space. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of this place. Just fixing engines, changing oil. Sam laughed. No, you don't, not really. You were always meant for bigger things. The garage was just your starting point. Joe smiled. Maybe Sam was right. The next morning before leaving town, Joe visited the Peterson house one last time. Kate and Alan were thrilled when he told them about the possibility of Lily joining his team at the Coalition hub. From the moment you gave her that car, she's been unstoppable, Kate said. This seems like the natural next step for her. As Joe's shuttle lifted off, he looked down at the shrinking town below. From Red Brook to the stars, it had all started with a simple desire to help a child feel included. 1 month later, Joe stood at a viewport on the Coalition hub station, a massive structure orbiting in neutral space between 3 star systems. Beside him stood Lily, her eyes wide as she took in the view of distant stars and the occasional ship moving between them. Hard to believe it all started with a mini car in a small garage, Joe said. Lily smiled. One act of kindness can lead anywhere. even to the stars. A coalition representative approached them, a tall being with blue-tinted skin and large, thoughtful eyes. "Engineer Miller, we're ready for the demonstration of your new universal control system." Joe nodded. "This is my associate, Lily Peterson. She'll be helping with the adaptations for human physiology." The being bowed slightly to Lily. "We welcome your perspective." As they walked toward the laboratory, Joe felt a sense of amazement at how far his life had come. From a small-town mechanic to someone whose designs were helping beings across the galaxy. And it all began with seeing a child who needed something he could build. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness opened the biggest doors.